The desert sun hammered down with a merciless fury, turning the endless expanse of sand and rock into a furnace that seemed to breathe fire. Every grain of sand sparkled like a tiny ember, and the wind carried whispers, half mad, half desperate, through the jagged canyons. Somewhere ahead, a scream shattered the heat-haze silence, sharp and frantic, echoing off the cliffs like a warning. Jake Thornton, a lone cowboy with a reputation that preceded him, tightened his grip on the reins. His horse snorted, uneasy under the weight of tension that radiated like a live wire. He had seen danger before, bandits, rattlesnakes, even the storms that could swallow men whole. But this was different. This cry had a fragility to it, like the delicate thread of life itself, and it tugged at something deep inside him. He galloped forward, dust choking the air around him, eyes scanning the canyon walls. The cry came again, louder, more desperate. It was a child, a small, terrified human being caught in the unforgiving grip of the desert. Jake urged his horse harder, feeling the familiar rhythm of galloping hooves match, the rapid beat of his own heart. And then he saw her, a little girl, no more than 7, clung to the edge of a rocky outcrop, her tiny hands scraping against jagged stone, her eyes wide with terror. Below her stretched a drop that would have killed any man, and yet she clung as if sheer will alone could keep her alive. Jake didn't hesitate. He slid off his horse, moving with the speed and precision of a man who had faced death too many times to fear it. "Hold on, little one," he shouted, though his voice sounded small against the vastness of the canyon. The girl's eyes locked onto him, and for a split second there was recognition, an instinctual trust that somehow crossed the boundary between strangers. The wind whipped dust into his face as he reached her. "I've got you," he said, grasping her trembling arms and pulling with all his strength. The stone beneath them threatened to crumble, but Jake's hands were steady. Slowly, agonizingly, inch by inch, he brought her back to solid ground. Her sobs were raw and shattering, echoing through the canyon. Jake wiped the sweat and dust from his face, chest heaving, his own body trembling from adrenaline. And then he heard the other sound, the soft, measured footsteps of someone else approaching. A woman stepped out from behind a boulder, her presence commanding despite her silent movement. Her skin was bronzed by the sun, her eyes dark and burning with a fierce intelligence. Her long hair was woven with feathers and beads, each telling a story of her people. She was Apache, every line of her body speaking of survival, strength, and the weight of traditions older than the land itself. "You saved my child," she said, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. "By our traditions, I belong to you." Jake froze, the words slicing through the adrenaline-fueled haze of the rescue. He wanted to respond, to protest, to argue, but there was an undeniable weight to her gaze, the kind that left no room for denial. This was no ordinary gratitude. It was an ancient law, a binding promise, a claim that would not be ignored. The girl clung to her mother's skirts, still trembling but safe. Jake felt the magnitude of the moment pressing down on him. In one instant, he had crossed the line from stranger to something far more complicated. He had stepped into a world ruled by customs he barely understood, and now his freedom hung in balance. The woman studied him, her eyes piercing, searching. "You will come with us," she said simply, as if stating a fact of nature. "The path you choose from here will be yours, but understand this: honor cannot be denied, and the law of our people is older than any fear you carry." Jake exhaled slowly, feeling the heat of the sun and the weight of history press down on his shoulders. I don't know your ways," he admitted, his voice rough, honest. "But I saved her because I had to, not for laws or debts, just because it was the right thing." She nodded, as if acknowledging his courage, but her eyes softened only slightly. "Then you will learn," she said, "that right and duty are often the same thing. What you have done cannot be undone, and what you owe cannot be ignored." For a moment the wind seemed to still, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The canyon walls, painted in fire and shadow, framed the three of them, a child saved, a cowboy caught in a web of fate, and a mother whose traditions held power over life itself. Jake glanced at the girl, then back at her mother. He knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same. The desert had given him a gift, yes, but it had also claimed a part of him in return. And somewhere in the vast emptiness, he could already hear the whispers of trials to come, dangers, loyalties, and choices that would test every fiber of his being. The woman extended her hand, not in greeting but as a silent declaration. "Come," she said. "The night will fall soon, and the land is not kind to those who wander alone. If you are brave enough to follow, your place is here." Jake hesitated. The sun burning his back and the canyon stretching endlessly in front of him. He knew that whatever choice he made now would define him forever. Then, with a slow, deliberate breath, he stepped forward, taking her hand. The girl's small fingers reached for his, gripping with trust and innocence. The first step into her world was simple, but the consequences were not. Behind them, the canyon returned to its silence, the wind whispering of dangers lurking beyond sight. But for the first time in days, maybe weeks, Jake felt a strange kind of peace. The certainty that whatever lay ahead, he had done something that mattered. Something that had changed everything. And so the desert held its secrets. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and the cowboy walked into a life bound by honor, tradition, and a promise he could not break. The journey had begun. The night had fallen over the desert, and the stars stretched endlessly above, cold and indifferent. Jake rode beside the Apache mother and her child, the weight of her words from earlier still heavy in his mind. "By their traditions I belong to you." He had accepted the claim, but now he began to understand what it truly meant. The tribe's village emerged as a cluster of fires in the distance, shadows dancing across faces carved by hardship and survival. Jake felt the stares of the people, curious, cautious, evaluating him. Every step he took was measured. Every breath reminded him that he was no longer an outsider. The mother approached him, her eyes softer now, but still commanding. "You have shown courage," she said. "But courage alone is not enough. You must live by our ways. Respect the land, respect the people, and protect those you swore to protect." Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of the promise he had made. He had come to save a child, but in doing so, he had stepped into a life of responsibility, of honor that demanded more than skill with a gun or strength of will. It demanded loyalty, respect, and humility. The girl ran ahead, laughing for the first time since her peril. Her joy was contagious, and for a moment Jake allowed himself a small smile. The desert, which had seemed so harsh and unyielding, now felt like the beginning of something new, a world that demanded courage but also rewarded heart. Days passed, and Jake learned the ways of the tribe. How to move silently through the desert, how to hunt, how to read the signs of danger, and most importantly, how to protect those who depended on him. Each lesson brought him closer to understanding not just their traditions, but the meaning of honor, loyalty, and love. One evening, as the sun sank behind the cliffs, the mother approached him again. "You have kept your promise," she said. "By our traditions, you are bound to us, but now, you belong here in spirit, not just in law." Jake looked at her, then at the child, then out at the vast desert beyond. He felt a strange peace settle in his chest. The promise had been heavy, but it had led him to something he could not have imagined. A place where he was needed, where he belonged, and where his courage truly mattered. The desert wind carried a quiet approval, rustling the fires of the village and whispering through the canyon. Jake had saved a life, honored a tradition, and in doing so, had found a new one. And so, under the endless sky, the cowboy and the Apache family walked into the future together, bound by fate, honor, and the unbreakable threads of a promise kept, the end.